Welcome to Pop Off, where we take a few minutes to chat about education, play, pop culture, as it's happening in the public conversation. And you can see me and Nathan struggle to figure out what the relevance is to education and what advice we want to give you. So let's talk about the phrase "and related to kids these days." Right? So this week, we're not going to answer the question of kids these days, do they actually play? Because we hear a lot of complaints about that, right? Kids these days don't know how to fill in the blank.
Yep.
Whatever it is. And
the kids these days are always on their screens.
Yeah.
Kids these days, they have a short attention span.
Yeah. Kids these days don't know how to touch grass and go outside, right?
Right.
So I feel like there's a lot of that, and I'm sure that we've all said that. I know that I've probably said that at some point, too.
Kids these days can't throw a perfect spiral.
Oh, my God. That's what Travis would say.
I can't throw a perfect spiral either.
But I'm
a kid, so it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think the answer is always, do kids these days know how to play? The answer is always yes. And we've spent 5 seasons talking about that very question.
Absolutely.
Right? That their play looks different. It looks different for different kinds of people. It looks different across time. It looks different in different kinds of contexts, right? So at any particular moment, such as now, it's not really an exception, right? Because throughout history, this has always happened, right? We always like to complain about kids these days. So I thought we would kind of talk about nostalgia.
Yeah.
You know, like memories that you have going back in the day kind of mentality. And I think there is a very important space for nostalgia and memory making and thinking about good times and things like that. But
we do that a lot on this show, right?
We do that a ton on our show. I feel like everybody knows our whole life story now. But I also feel like nostalgia can sometimes prevent us from thinking about really complex issues in very nuanced ways.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to start with something very localized, and then we're going to kind of move out a little bit.
Up and out.
Yeah, because I want to make an argument that nostalgia is good. Nostalgia can also be really problematic, but then nostalgia can also have an impact in ways that can be really bad. Problematic.
Not great.
Yes. So I'm going to start with the whole like parents starting off telling you, like, I'm sure this has happened to you.
Back in the day,
I used to walk 100 miles to school uphill on an icy road. It was snowing to get to school, right? And that would be the thing. Like anytime there was a complaint, my mom or dad or somebody would be like, I used to have to eat like scraps in the dirt for food, so you should eat this food.
You don't know how good you have it. Whenever I was a kid, all the pain that I experienced.
So I feel like it starts really early, right? And then you get to school and teachers tell you, when I was a kid, I do like 100 worksheets. Yeah. So instead of 100, I'm just asking you to do 1. And they were so much harder, right?
Yeah.
It's like easy for us to kind of, I've definitely said that to students that I've taught.
That's because kids these days can't write an essay, Haeny.
Yes, exactly. Right. So I feel like we kind of use that as a way to get kids to sort of do what we want or to shut up or to stop complaining.
Why do we do that? I mean, like,
why do you think we do that?
It's kind of wild, right? Because it is not motivating in any way for a kid to hear that this hypothetical or this fictional story about how hard you had it, right? It's not motivating to them, right? So why do we say it over and over again? Why do we constantly use this as a frame to talk down to kids?
I think because it's easy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I feel like when kids are like that moniker, like, why is the sky blue? Yeah. It's so much easier to just be like, because. Because I said so. Right? And I feel like using nostalgia or back to the day mentality, I feel like is kind of an easy way to explain something.
Yeah. And it also makes it about you too in an interesting way, right? Like you may be a teacher, you may be a parent, and you're presumably wanting to help this kid write an essay or be comfortable eating the school lunch, but really you instead make it about yourself and how actually you're great and you've had struggles, and look how wonderful I've turned out. So
like I did what you did, so you must suffer as well.
Yeah, right. It's
just
really
like
toxic twist. Yeah.
Toxic twist.
Ooh,
Is that a new phrase? Trademark. Very good. Okay, but in all seriousness, I think I want to talk about like what nostalgia can potentially do then in the larger culture, right? So I remember a couple of years ago when the science of reading was making its way into New York City. The chancellor at the time was David Banks.
Okay.
Who, retired, I think, retired, quote, in 2024. And so I remember him, he was on, I feel like it was a legislative floor doing some kind of talk about reading. Yeah. And he was basically like, I remember when I was in primary school, there was not a single kid in my class who could not read.
Oh.
Because we were taught like whatever. We were taught phonics or we were taught a certain way.
Right.
And I think it's easy for adults to be like, yeah, when I was in second grade, I remember when I was 7, everybody could read. Like, do you really remember this? Like, could everybody read? Like, did you only learn phonics? Like, I feel like it's really like misremembering something or trying to figure out a story that could fit into the narrative that you want to tell.
100%. I mean, I can't remember what I did yesterday, and kids are more observant than we give them credit for. But the idea that they would be aware of everyone's kind of capabilities around reading at that age is it strains credulity to get to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the same vein, like I remember I was really obsessed with that idea of how do people talk about certain things. And so there's this researcher, Elena Aydarova, and she basically did this policy analysis. So she, the article is called Whatever You Want to Call It, and it's in Harvard Ed Review. And she basically did this analysis of the Tennessee legislature and how they talked about reading programs and phonics.
Right, sure.
And basically a ton of them, even in their debates to pass legislation, were like, I'm one of the older members here. I'm going to actually quote this. And phonics was taught as I came up through school. Another said, most of us learned with phonics, and many of us had school teachers that had on silk stockings. Like, it was just like such a nostalgic way of thinking about back in the day. Like, back in the day, this is how I was taught. So today...
Therefore, they have to do it too.
Yeah, this is how we should talk. And I think it's a really dangerous thing, right? When you think about your back in the day mentality and you're like, this is why this particular legislation has to pass.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. I think that is by definition conservative, right? It's kind of not imagining progress. It's not imagining change. It's not imagining the way in which a society can move and transform. Very, very dangerous. I mean, is the proposal here that the solution is one-room schools and lace stockings, silk stockings? Like, what's going on here?
I'm going to start doing that in my pre-service teacher ed program. Be like, everybody, today we're going to talk about silk stockings.
Here's how to put on silk stockings. It's funny that this is coming up too, because my son, for one of his assignments, he was supposed to interview me about my literacy history, I think is how he framed it. And he was like, what books, do you remember learning to read? What books did you read? This kind of thing. And I was like, I remember reading the sort of Dick and Jane and Spot books. Those have a name. What are they called? Like the Readers, something Readers. And like, I remember that, right? And that's one thing to say, I remember learning to read with these books. An entirely different thing to be like, and that's the way everyone should learn to read. I don't understand, separating those two things shouldn't be that hard for us to do.
Yeah. And I feel like when I think about that too, when I think about those readers, I always have to, if I actually sit back and think about it for a second, I'm like, maybe that isn't how I learned to read.
Right.
Maybe that's the story, though, about how I think I learned to read.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And that's the story that I'm going to tell now, and I'm going to stick to it because it's a really nice, convenient truth.
Yeah, because no one can check me on it. So
yeah, so therefore it's true.
It must be true.
Yeah. So I think that, I think at the end of the day, like, I want people to consider, like, I think we're always looking for an easy solution to things that are actually really tough and complicated to answer. And, reading is one of them, but there's lots of other things, right? Like when we think about gun violence or when we think about mental health or, all of that, like those policies are driven by people, right? And their ideas and the stories that they tell, right? And part of it is that nostalgia that can be really dangerous.
Yeah. And any individual component of reading or of school or, of the history that you remember existed in a broader system of things, right? And so, you mentioned the gun violence thing. This is a thing that we hear our politicians say all the time is like, well, when we were kids, there were guns. I grew up in a farm school and kids had guns. RFK said something just the other day that like we were encouraged to bring handguns to school, which is absolutely,
I'm sure it was not true.
an insane thing to say.
Yeah.
But even if it were true, it's not about whether or not guns existed. It's the context and the culture and the systems in which these things exist in. It's not about whether or not it's a weekly reader book or whatever those were called. Weekly readers were those other things, those news things. Those were awesome.
Scholastic.
Everyone should have those. Kids these days don't know what a weekly reader is.
These days. Back in my day, we used to have weekly readers.
But it's the context in which those things exist in, right? And that has changed.
Yeah.
And we should work within that context. And we should work within the future context that we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah. And I think people like to think that this time is worse than any other time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's actually not true. Every time was actually, I think people thought that in every time period, right? So this particular time is probably no exception to that.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I think there's probably, on the one hand, like, who cares? Like, what's the point of measuring which time is worse?
But it's always a competition.
It's always a competition. And on the other hand, it can be valuable to recognize that, like, we've been here before. We've been in really hairy, difficult, not great experiences, and we've found a way to kind of move on through that. And so, focusing on the comparison of how bad is it now and how bad is it before is not the most effective way to move forward.
Yeah. So my last thing I'm going to say is there's this episode of the Throughline podcast. They have this really great episode. It's called Nostalgia Bone, and I've talked about it so many times in different contexts. But it basically talks about nostalgia, not necessarily as a bad or good, because I think it's really dangerous also to think about things in binaries all the time.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they talked about was this example in like World War I, where all these soldiers were like falling ill all the time, like for no reason. And they were like, why are all these soldiers like getting ill for no reason? It's like they would smell something or they would hear a sound and then all of a sudden they would fall ill. And then they realized that what happened was these soldiers were homesick. Okay, so they would smell something that reminded them of their mom's cooking or something, and it would make them sick, right? Or they would like taste something that reminded them of something, and then it would make them sick because they longed for home because they were away from home for so long. And so then they started to think about like this idea of nostalgia as a concept, right? That we get nostalgic for something because we, because it helps us emotionally, right? It helps us physically. Like, I feel like there's also these effects that happen because of it. So in the same way, enslaved people would have the same effect happen to them, right? Like they would fall ill because they remembered something or a scent or an action or something someone said would remind them of something from back home. And instead of attributing it to nostalgia or homesickness like they did with the World War I soldiers, they would be accused of not working hard enough.
Right, like a weakness.
Yeah. And as we know, the consequences are a lot more detrimental then. So nostalgia, on the one hand, can be acceptable, even expected, right, for one group of people, but unacceptable and completely forbidden for others.
It'd be very appropriate for us to acknowledge that a lot of the societal challenges that we're wrestling with right now collectively, especially in the United States, is this kind of nostalgia that has run amok, this belief that there was a prior time where things were good and things now are not like those times. And it is one particular version of a history that somebody remembers and neglecting the other pain and other experiences that others have had. Not great.
Yeah, not great. So let's talk about why we wanted to talk about this. What's the takeaway?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Do you have a solution?
Oh God, no. I mean, I like your point about avoiding binaries here, because I think there's a lot about looking back and kind of memory, homesickness, nostalgia that can be positive, that can help us remind us who we are, can help us remind us who else was there with us or who else has had similar experiences. That can be positive and that can create community, right? But it also clearly can be something that if we get too stuck in, we fail to recognize kind of the beauty and the wonder and the exciting, great things that are happening now, and the ways in which that change can also be positive and good. So I really appreciate you kind of helping us wrestle with that, moving out of those binaries.
Yeah. And I think related to that, I feel like one really practical application that we could all take up is we could all practice not using nostalgia to explain something. Right? So I feel like the examples that I gave, I think it's easy to use a back in the day mentality to weaponize whatever issue you want to be on the side of, right? And instead of doing that, I feel like some of us can start to think about issues really deeply, right? And consider the idea that we might not have the answers to something, that we can't always rely on our nostalgic stories to explain something away, right? So I think, maybe we should just stop thinking about that as a solution.
So you're saying when my kids complain about dinner, I can't
try not to say back in the day.
When I was a kid,
exactly.
I had to eat broccoli every day, 4 times a day.
Yeah, because we know that's what happened.
J.B. Holbert, I'll never forget.
Don't isolate our listeners. And I also feel like it's okay to be nostalgic for things, right? I feel like the takeaway from our episode is not like stop being nostalgic, right? It's what makes us human. It's what makes us able to relate to people, right? It's what connects us. It's what, like you said, brings community, right? But we also want to remember then what that is for, right? Nostalgia can have the power to really bring us together. It can also have the power to really tear us apart and make lasting policy changes, curricular changes, political decisions, things like that impact young people, right? So we want to think about what this is for, who it's going to impact, and then how we want to approach this idea.
Love it. Yeah, well said. Thank you.
All right, so.
Way to pop off.
Yeah, it felt good.
I feel better.
Yeah, sometimes popping off feels good.
Kids these days, they don't pop off like we used to.
Yeah. Gosh, let's implement a policy where we have to pop off once a day.
Hey, I'm into it. Well, thank you for joining us this week. We will be back in 2 weeks for another episode. Coming up, we are moving through season 6, where we've got a lot of fun play dates planned for you. So keep an eye out on our social media accounts on Instagram and Blue Sky to find out what those are, and join us. Play along with us.
And also, please leave us a comment, rate the show, share the episode with your friends, and follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky. And on our Blue Sky account, we've actually curated a feed. Well, actually, Nathan's curated a feed of past,
air quotes.
Past Pop and Play guests. So check it out.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.